Hello, everybody. How are you doing?
Good.
Smiling? Some smiling? Okay, good. So thank you for coming out tonight. I know it's a busy time of year. We've hosted this event, What's the Difference? Public, private, charter school panel for the third year, I think. And this is, the purpose of this event is just to really give you guys some information about the different types of school settings that you could potentially be applying for once you finish your programs. Because there's so many different types, and I know a lot of you have experience exclusively with public schools. So I hope that you get a lot of information tonight. We have 3 alumni here ready to share their experiences representing public schools, charter, private, and virtual. So I'm going to just introduce them really quick. You should have gotten a handout when you came in. If you didn't, just raise your hand and I can bring one over to you. It has their bios there. So I'll let you guys read those over. And then I'll introduce them, and then they're going to share just a quick overview of their professional experiences, and then we're just going to turn it over to you guys to ask the burning questions that you have. Okay? So we have Anthony Tadaldi. He graduated the secondary MAC program, and he's a chemistry teacher at Belleville High School. And we have Iris Young. She was an elementary MAC student, and she is currently at the Dearborn Academy. And then we have Larry Biederman. He is at the Insight School of Michigan, and he is also a secondary MAC alumnus. So I'm going to turn it over to them. Whoever wants to start.
I'll start.
There you go. Okay.
I'll start by saying all of you are very far away. We have empty desks here. Please feel free to move up because we don't fight it.
I was going to say the same thing.
I stole your line.
Tell
Yeah.
the teachers,
Yeah.
right?
Can we
Yeah, right.
move?
Yeah,
Can we
move.
move up, please?
Yeah. Thank
We'll have a more intimate conversation.
Well,
Thank you.
and as you're moving, I'll explain my public school experience. Personally, I grew up and I went to Catholic school all through into college until I got to U of M. And so my first time ever really in a public high school was when I was student teaching at Dixie Community High School. So technically I've been in public high school for the last 4 years. I currently teach at Belleville High School. And my experience seems to be typical. Our day starts at about 7:20. Students arrive about that time. First hour starts at 7:40. We have certain requirements as far as we meet with PLTs. If you're familiar with what PLT stands for, Professional Learning Team, so we have a requirement like that where we meet every other Tuesday. We have to go to staff meetings maybe twice a month. Those are required under our contract. And our school does have a union in which the union helps make sure that our administration is in line with certain things. So typical day-to-day at Belleville High School.
Hi, I'm Iris Young. I graduated in 2014. I was elementary with my ESL endorsement, and so right now I'm an ESL teacher at the Dearborn Academy. Sorry, repeated that. The school's right next to the big mosque on Ford Road. I don't know if you're familiar with Dearborn at all, but we're right there, and it's about over 60% EL population. The primary languages spoken there are Arabic and Spanish. So my Arabic is improving year by year. And a lot of the kids come to us because the parents don't want their children in Detroit for whatever reason. There are good schools out there, but I think they feel better bringing their children to our school. And our leadership is great. I think they've done a really good job of building relationships with the parents, and so it feels like a family. I think that's something that's unique about our community. So, I'll talk about that in a minute.
Hi, I'm Larry. That's my son Andrew over here. Before I begin, I'm going to mention one quick thing. I have Tourette syndrome. So once in a while, I make weird random noises, which is like normal for me. And I say random words and phrases that have absolutely no sense and logic to what I am saying or trying to say. So if you hear me talking about soup, for example, that's part of Tourette syndrome. So it's normal for me, and just if I interrupt you, just try to keep on going. You don't have to worry about me. And when I say weird phrases that might be funny, it's okay to laugh, because when I'm rambling about soup, it's actually kind of funny. So my students, they get used to it pretty quickly, and I'm sure you will too. So I teach currently at a virtual school, an online charter school. I teach high school. In the past, I've taught at all the others. I've taught at private for 5 years. I've taught in public schools. I've taught in charter schools. I did mostly private and charter, but I have done some public school teaching. Since we're talking about a typical day, my typical day is very different because I work from home. By the way, I work for a real school. So that's like the big thing that people want to know. Is it a real school? Yes, it's a real school. It's a real charter school. We have a special education department, and we have a principal, and we have all the subjects.
Sorry.
We have IEPs, we have 504s. We don't have a marching band, but we do, and we have state testing, and we have certified teachers because we're a charter school. And because we're a charter school, we have to follow the same rules that every charter school and every public school does in terms of state requirements. And we do pretty much everything online, parent-teacher conferences, classes, assignments, everything is done online except for state testing. And STEP and SAT have to be done in person. So that's a whole different world for us in April, when we have to actually see our students and find out what they look like. But I work at home, and all my students, they log in from home, and pretty much every staff member at our school works from home. We just have a few staff members who work from an office in Lansing. I work from my home in Milan, which is just south of here, on the way to Dundee, so maybe about 20 minutes south of here. Typical day for me, well, I get up early and I do some work, and then I get my wife up, then I get my son up, and then I walk with him to school in the morning. I get to do that because I work from home. And I can take my school with me in my pocket. When I'm not actually teaching, I can forward all of my incoming communications to my cell phone, and I can still be online and connected while I'm walking my son to school and still be technically on the clock. It's kind of cool. During the day, we don't teach live classes as much as a brick school. I teach only about 3 live hours per day, and then the rest of the day you're like thinking, oh my gosh, that's awesome, and that's only Monday through Thursday too. So the rest of the time, on the other days of the week and on Fridays, we have lots of meetings. We spend lots of time helping individual students. I spend a ton of time on making my PowerPoint presentations because it takes a lot of time to put together all the PowerPoint presentations that I have to do. Grading, of course, IEPs. We do lots of staff and professional development. We do lots of data-driven activities. So we do a lot. We just don't have as much live class time because we actually don't really need it. But during the day, I do go in and out of live sessions where I interact with my students live via our own system. It's not like we email assignments back and forth. The students have their own system, and we have our own system we all log into. And we have one system that we log into, and it gives them everything. It gives them their assignments, it tells them their grades, it gives them access to their live class sessions, it gives them resources that they need to learn, access to resources that I provide. It's all in one big login so that the students and I are all on one system. So we don't have to do something silly like email an assignment. They would complete an assignment and it would go into the system, and I would grade it, and then that would automatically connect to their grade book. And at the end of the day, I get to be home a lot more with my family, which I really enjoy. I do get a little bit stir crazy during the winter time, spring, fall too, because I'm working from home. Sometimes I want to get outside, get a little more fresh air. I've cut down on fast food consumption, because when I was in grade school, I always like stopping off at like McDonald's and Starbucks to and from school. But so I've cut down on the fast food, but now that I'm working at home, I've increased other foods. I've put on a couple of pounds since I started working on at virtual schools. But it is very rewarding. We are an alternative school, so we're working primarily with students who are not doing well in traditional brick schools, and they need a different environment.
Thank you so much, you guys. And I forgot to mention Kelly Bertelrud. She was supposed to be here tonight, one of our panelists. She was with the elementary MAC program. She was not feeling well, so she was very upset to miss this, but we wish her well. And she did say that you are more than welcome to reach out to her. So her contact information is on that handout that you received. So I suggest looking into her school. She teaches at Mark Murray Elementary School in Detroit, and a lot of our alumni have taught there, are currently teaching there, and like really love it. So definitely feel free to reach out to her. Okay.
Super duper, super.
How are we feeling about questions? I want to turn it over to you guys to ask whatever's on your mind, whether you know a lot about school settings outside of public or not. This is a safe environment. You can ask whatever's on your mind. Go, Joe. Can you come up here? Sorry,
Sure.
to ask. Just so we're recording this for our students who are missing the event, so that'd be helpful to get everybody on the microphone.
I was just going to ask what the primary difference you noticed in the hiring process between public, private, and charter, like if you thought there were differences, if any.
I've been through that interview process a couple years ago, and I did interview for all three types of schools. So public school, I felt like they had like a common flow, especially depending on your district. There were cycles of, there's like the application, and then you go in, and then maybe there's another interview, you do like a practice teach. With the charter schools, depending on how developed the charter school was, one of my first interviews in a charter school was with Canton Preparatory High School. Are you familiar with that? It was in its like second year when I was interviewing, so they kind of had an idea of what they wanted, and so they were very pointed with their questions, and they were looking for somebody who was really experienced. And they had you do everything in one day. Whereas in the public schools that I've interviewed, it was like a 2 or 3 day process. And then with the online, it was more just like, I didn't have to go anywhere. I had an online interview with school, and that also felt like public school, where it was in the sense of there were these three type of, you sent in an application, then you chatted with them with some interview questions, and then you did like a practice teach of some sort. So that's a typical interview that I've seen, where you make it through like 2 or 3 stages, or what I've experienced, where you send in an application, then they speak to you about a couple of things, see if they want you to go to another process, and then you do like a practice or demo lesson, and they talk about that. And I've also been on the other end where I've interviewed people, and we do the same thing, where we are looking for a teacher, we're looking for a specific content area or a specific maybe type of teacher, maybe somebody who is going to be a specific way with students as far as classroom management behavior. It depends on the school and what they're looking for and need, and that all depends on your research on that school. So if you know people at that school, it's probably better. That's why it's amazing to have like the connections, like you know what that school is looking for. As far as we need a math teacher. We need a math teacher who's with this curriculum. We need a science teacher who's doing the next generation science standards, or we need somebody who's big on Common Core. So as far as like what to expect, make the research with connections, and just even reaching out to the school is important to help you get a leg up on what's going on.
I'd say a big difference that I noticed at the actual interview, I've seen, maybe you've seen differently, but I've seen, it seemed like the public schools were more organized in their interview.
Yep.
The interviews from public schools, they often had, 4 or 5 people on the committee. They often prepared their questions in advance. Each person on the committee had like all my credentials in a nice neat packet. Sometimes they, send me the questions in advance. That was kind of like the typical thing I saw in public school. And during the interview process, much more likely to ask to do a model lesson. much more likely to have a second or third interview round. Whereas with the private and the charter schools and private schools, not saying they're bad about private charter schools, I love them, but they weren't as formal. The interview process was often a little bit easier to manage. It wasn't as, I didn't have to like, I can't ever recall at a charter school or a private school, sitting down to like a 6-person committee.
Yeah, I have to agree. I think I interviewed with the most people when I was going to my interviews with public schools. And it was like a few round process, like 2 or 3 callbacks and then the waiting. Whereas in the charter schools, it was very straightforward. As you said, doing things in one day. And at my school, I actually had to do I don't know if you call it a personality test, but like that was specific to my school. I'm not saying other schools would do that. Yeah, I don't know if
They're
you're
goofy.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
But it was a part of my interview process, and so it's just interesting that the different little things that you'll find that differ from school to school.
And what I've seen from the interview end is now, I mean, depending on your district, the public schools have to have a teacher on the panel along with admin, and they try and get like another staff. So you have just from our school, our logistics is it doesn't matter what teacher. Sometimes they just randomly pull a person and they're like, okay, we need a teacher, come with us. And because teachers are busy, I don't know if you know that. And so I mean, this happened last week. We were trying to interview somebody. Right, and so we needed to interview somebody quickly, and we were all just like in the middle of a PLT, and they're like, oh, we need someone quick, come on. And so sometimes the people on your panel don't know, haven't even looked at you until maybe they saw the piece of paper in front of you. But it is organized in the sense that we need a meeting with 4 people, and then we're going to talk about it, and then it's like a process and steps. So the process is there, but the preparation on our end may not be like 100%. Like they will not know your name, and like most, like even especially the people on the panel, they may not know your name and face and know your whole story. So you've got to bring that to them. Maybe they just have a piece of paper. So I wouldn't be too worried if there's like 6 people in the room, because 4 of them probably didn't plan to be there. Right?
Yeah. A more established charter school, more established private school, they may have taken the time to put together a more organized process for interviewing. But most of the private schools and charter schools I did were less formal and a little more easygoing. I know sometimes I've got questions that like came from a district, like I'll be at a school, and Ann Arbor does this, by the way. I'm at a school, and I go to another school, and I get the same question, because they all came from the central district offices.
Or are we allowed to say schools' names? Is it going to be bleeped out or something?
No, it won't be bleeped out.
Oh, no, that's okay.
Yeah, so yes, you're welcome to share whatever.
No,
The recording will be accessible to students and alumni only.
Oh, it's not going to be live.
Not public.
So I mean, because another school, now I'm going to not say the name, because I'm paranoid. It was and it was a charter school. But by the way, do we know that charter and public, they are public, right? Charter is public. It's just their setup is a bit different. I did get through a crazy interview process with a charter school, and they made me go in twice, which was a little odd for my public school interviews. And it was like an intense, like I had to watch 2 videos. Each video was like 25 minutes. I had to reflect on those 2 videos, which was kind of cool. And I was doing it in the math program anyways, but it was like more homework that I didn't need. So I don't know if you have homework. And so we had to like watch these 25-minute videos, reflect on them, and you really had to use some jargon and terminology to really stick out. And then you went in for the interview after those questions, and then they talked about that video and your response. And then after that, in the same day later on, it was like an 8-hour interview, where later on in the day you would be in a classroom and they would throw you into doing some form of a lesson. So there are charter schools and it's more like we said over here, the more established charter schools that have been around for a while, they have a process and a way to figure out who they are looking for and what they want at their school. So even though I did say public schools is kind of intense, depends on if the charter school's been around for a long time.
Okay, next question.
Hi, Hi, my name's Macy. I'm in the elementary undergrad program, so this is kind of pointed towards Iris since she's elementary. What would you say like the biggest differences, like going from like your interning like for the LMAC in a public school and then teaching in a charter school?
So, my experience is, I wouldn't say unique, but I didn't go straight into classroom. I did what is now being
Wow.
called MTSS.
Wow. Ooh, wow.
And,
Wow.
but
Wow.
it was formerly
Wow.
known as RTI. And so I was not a classroom teacher. And now I'm in ESL, so I'm like a specialist right now. But the transition, sorry, can you repeat the first
Yeah,
question?
just kind of like what was like the biggest difference like between it, like going from public to charter?
I don't know if there was, maybe the biggest difference was like how things were organized. Like, my schools were essentially their own little district that was a part of a network. The school I'm at now is not, but I noticed that they're organized in a very, like they can do things how they want, as opposed to like, this is what the whole district is doing. It's like, we are the district. And then I've had the privilege of working with people who are very organized, and so like, they were it. And they're like, this is the structure, this is the framework we're working in, these are the priority standards, this is what you're doing, make your schedule, blah, 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 blah. But it's very like contained and organized. And so if we have problems with whatever, we can talk to the powers that be, because they're right in our building, as opposed to like having these other structures that are like, this is a district-wide thing, like I can complain about this, but nothing is going to happen. So, I mean, that still happens in charters, like you can be like, I don't like this, and then it still won't change. But at least I have that relationship with my administration, and I guess a side note to that, being what I am, like there's no one overseeing me and my coworkers. So the burden of responsibility of finding who's on our student list and creating our own schedules and tracking down home language surveys and all this other administrative stuff falls on us. And it's very like, there's a lot of expectations for like doing our classroom work and doing a lot of other things. And then we actually recently had our discipline coordinator, she went to a different district, and so a lot of the elementary teachers, well, in middle school too, have taken up the responsibility of heading PBIS up, whereas that one person was doing it before, now it's a lot of people. And lastly, I feel like if I had a coordinator above me, they would have been the ones presenting at the conferences that I would just hear about, but my principal has, she's asked me and a classmate of mine who was my cohort mate, she was like, well, you guys are the ones doing the work, you're working with the ESL kids, come with me to the conference and present with me. We're like, but you're the principal, like, you know, you have this title, but she's like, yeah, but you're teaching the kids. And so I feel like I get this privilege of sharing about my practice at the state level, but I'm just like teaching at a little school, but I have these opportunities I don't know that I would have if I was working in a big district. Not that I wouldn't want to, but it's just the situation I'm in right now, so.
Would it be helpful to just really quickly run down the differences between public and private and charter schools? Do everyone know how charter schools work and get funded and all that stuff?
I don't.
That'd be helpful.
Okay, so let's take. You know, I've been through them all, so I'll add since I offered to. Let's take a student who attends a public school in Ann Arbor. That student's education is funded by the state of Michigan and by Ann Arbor city taxes. Another student who, let's say, also lives in Ann Arbor and attends a charter school, that student's education is funded by the state of Michigan, but not Ann Arbor. So that charter school gets less money for that student. And then another student who is in Ann Arbor who goes to a private school, that student's education is funded by his or her parents and wealthy donors and wherever else they can get their money from, auctions and stuff like that. Ultimately, the school that is a public school answers to the public school board. Whereas the staff at a charter school, they don't answer to, they have a school board, but above that school board is a chartering university. For instance, my school is chartered by Central Michigan University. And so instead of answering to a school board, ultimately, you ultimately answer to a university. And both the public school and the charter school all have to abide by all the state rules and regulations. So all of your teachers in a public school and a charter school, which as you pointed out, a charter school is a public school, have to be certified, have to do state testing. Now, go to that private school, those teachers don't need to be certified. And I've been at private schools where I know most teachers who teach at private school are certified teachers or were certified teachers. I only know one teacher in a private school who was never ever certified. But many of them let their certification lapse because they think they're untouchable at a nice, cushy private school. I wouldn't recommend that. But those are the big differences. So a private school, because they are not funded by the state of Michigan, they have less rules and less regulations that they have to follow. But the public schools and the charter schools have to all follow all those state rules and regulations because they're getting state funds.
Thank you, Larry. That was helpful.
Maybe it'd be good to talk about kind of maybe the curriculum that each of you use, or those state requirements you were talking about, Larry, and how that factors into the flexibility you have in what you teach and how you teach it. So if each one of you could speak to that, I think that'd be great.
Well, I mean, so the state school is by state standards. So my school, we have a curriculum that is pre-built by K-12. K-12, if you haven't heard of them, is a huge company. They're like McDonald's of online education. They have charter schools in, I think, like more than 30 states. And they have a pre-made curriculum which has tests and quizzes and tutorials and assignments that they give to me. And then I decide how much of that is relevant to my students in Michigan. Because what they give to me may be relevant, it's common core curriculum. So as it's a good curriculum, but it's not everything. And as you probably heard, you ever heard this expression, the textbook is not the curriculum, right? The textbook is a tool, it's a resource. Well, the online resources that I get, like a textbook, I have to pick and choose from them to decide what is going to fit best for my students, for their needs, especially because I have alternative students, and what's going to fit best for hitting state benchmarks within Michigan. So I have a lot of flexibility. I can look at something and say, no, I'm not going to do that, because that doesn't have anything to do with Michigan benchmarks. Or I could say, no, I'm not going to do that. That would cause my students to just flip out and go berserk. I may not hit every single benchmark that Michigan wants me to hit because, not because I'm an online school, but because I have alternative learners, students who have all sorts of reasons why they didn't fit the brick school environment. So I think that pretty much, so and I add to a lot to it too. So.
I could give you a whole list of all these textbooks and publishers, whatever. I don't need to do that. But because there are so many ELs in our school, we have to use what's called SIOP, or the Sheltered Instructional Observation Protocol, where the teachers are, they're basically teaching to the language structures as well as the content. I mean, it's great for all learners, but especially our kids who speak other languages in their homes. I personally, when I came to my current school, they're like, we don't have an ESL curriculum for you, cool, make it up. But it's, I mean, I'm not just making things up, but I am drawing from my training in LMAC, where I was looking at the standards, and we have our priority standards at the school, and I work to get closely with the classroom teachers, meet weekly, and I'm consulting with them about what the objectives are the kids working on, like, for science, like, for the next few weeks, or, and like, what are, like, how can I support the language part in all the language domains? And so so that's what I personally do. And any of the curriculum that I would have named for you, like for example, our kids use, the K-5 kids use Journeys, which is a textbook, but it's really hard for a lot of our second language learners, or English as a second language learners. So there's a lot of modification, a lot of accommodating that needs to be done, like adding visuals or preloading vocabulary or building the background knowledge, because some of these kids might not understand these words. And like in a textbook, it's like just text, and it's like, do they really know what they're reading? Like even if they can decipher it, even if they can spell, where's comprehension? And so, yeah. You could share.
I'm curious, by show of hands, who is going into secondary education? A lot. An elementary? Okay. And then for secondary education, science and math, if you could raise your hand.
Yeah, oh.
So I'm glad I don't need to talk about it. I will talk about it.
Well, hey, there's
I will
some
talk about
students
it.
that will.
I will talk about it.
And there are people watching us online.
I'm gonna start with the English and math. So we follow Common Core at the high school, public school, and they have a lot. The English and math departments are in a tizzy all the time because a lot is riding on them because of the SAT. The SAT score really depends on how much money we get and it's really important. And so there's a lot of stress on the math curriculum, and so they follow this thing known as Carnegie. And I don't know if you've ever heard of it, if you've ever heard anybody complain about it. It has a lot of, there's a big debate at my school over its usage. And I teach chemistry, so I do see it being an issue when my students have some common math mistakes or common math issues. And then the English really get hit hard. Somebody oversaw the entire English curriculum throughout the entire district. So somebody just planned the entire district's curriculum, one person. And they tried to make it horizontally, I forget what it's called, but like horizontally aligned, where like all schools like kind of lead to one, and like we all know where we're going. And there were just like a lot of essays being written, a lot of reading, and a lot of hitting on the SAT. So a lot of SAT prep happened in those English courses, but of course they connect to the Common Core curriculum. And then for science, we have, I feel like our department works the best, not that I'm biased or anything, but I feel like we don't have as much of a burden as the math and English people do, just because the standards keep on changing. And I don't know if you've heard of in science, the next generation science standards, those are big now, and Michigan was in the process of changing them, and so we're in this like weird, like I don't know what we are type of phase, where we're still kind of using the HESPs, which is the high school common curriculum ones, and we're trying to implement more next generation science standards. But we just got hit a couple of years ago with making sure that our students do well on the M step. And so that is our equivalent of our science standardized test. And so on the M step, which is awful. On the M step, it's like 40 questions, could be any content between chemistry, biology, earth science, physics. And they take it, so that was 4 sciences. Do you know when they take it? In their 3rd year. So we are still trying to figure out and restructure what to do with our curriculum to make sure that they're able to know 4 sciences by their 3rd year. And right now, to kind of cope with that, we run these extra, like, study sessions where we pull the juniors like weeks before the M step, and we just rush, like teach them each science class to make sure they do well. It did help them in the last year or so, and we're going to do that again because it helped, but we're still trying, like the science is still trying to reframe the curriculum. I think in Ann Arbor they do geophysical science as like their 1st year, which kind of hits like earth science and physics, and then they do chemistry and biology, so by their junior year they've actually taken 4 sciences. So we're trying to figure out what to do, whether we throw earth science into our curriculum, or earth science has to do something with chemistry and biology. So science is always kind of that question mark as to what is or are our standards. They're very fluid. And that's really what I feel like if I was as under strict guidelines as math and English, I might not be as free-flowing. So that's what's happening at the public school level, and that really all comes from the state. Whatever the state wants, we gotta give them.
I've seen difference. I've also seen difference between math and English compared to science and social studies. I also teach science. I also teach chemistry, and there is indeed now a difference in that math and English are getting more attention than science and social studies. At my school, students spend way more time doing math and English than they do science and social studies. In fact, at my school, it's actually about twice as much contact time, and even more. And there's more assessments and more data analysis and more just support and resources are thrown towards English and math because that's how our state is steering our students. So, which kind of makes it a little bit easier on science
I
and social,
agree.
because I gotta admit, there's stuff that my English and math teachers have to do that I don't have to do.
So I have so much respect, and they get crapped on all that, but I have so much respect for my English and math co-workers because they have a lot to do, and I would never ever want to grade an essay ever, so I do not envy that.
Who has a question?
There are no stupid questions. There's no silly questions. Come on, you've heard that. You're gonna be saying that in a short time. No silly questions.
Hello. I am a fourth year in education and psychology. It's a joint program, but it leans more towards psychology. So when I actually saw this talk, I was super interested in just being able to discuss the differences between these school systems in a comprehensive kind of way. So I guess when I hear about charter schools and private schools, I usually hear like this negative kind of stigma with it. So I guess, can we talk about what are some of the drawbacks between the differences? Like if I were talking to some of my friends now who are having children and they're having these debates about what type of school, send their child to, what are some things I'd be able to tell them between the difference between a public and like a charter school, specifically because I think about low-income communities of color and the not reemergence, but I see charter schools popping up all the time.
Yeah,
and
sure.
I really just want to know, I was like, what's actually happening here? Like, where are the public schools going? Like, I guess on a deeper level, I'm just wanting to know more about like what's happening there and what are the drawbacks, the problems within communities of why public schools are closing and charter schools are opening in public schools.
Well, that was a broad question, but I think what I want to start with is because the two people to my left here, they've actually worked in charter schools. So I'm going to start by saying some rumors I've heard about charter schools, and then both of you are going to say nope. So when I was first applying for teaching, I didn't care. I loved teaching, and I didn't care where I was. But some people, some mentors, some people that I was working with, they told me, don't ever work in charter schools. And so I didn't want to believe that, but they had told me that in charter schools you have extra jobs, you stay longer, you are required, you don't really have a contract, people could be fired at random. These are rumors, so I don't know this to be true because I've never worked in a charter school, I've just interviewed for them, that you have to have lunchroom duty, and you have to have study hall duty, and you have to be assigned after school extra activities as part of your work, and if you're not, then you may be fired because you are not being a team player. Whereas if you're in a public school, you have a contract, and it's really difficult to fire you. It's like a process, and firing you is more professional in the sense of, well, you have an evaluation, you have your 1 year to fix your evaluation in your second year. In your second year, you go, you know what? We've met with you, we've evaluated you, we don't think you'd be a good fit. Whereas I was told that doesn't happen at a charter school. So now the people to my left are going to verify and probably say that what I'm saying is completely wrong. But this is what I've been told in the interview process. I didn't let it bother me, and I know so many people who work in charter schools, so I don't know if this is true.
Well, been there, been through all three schools types. In terms of your job security, when you are in your first year of a public school, you have very little job security. So I've seen people fired during or after the conclusion of their first year in a public school. Once you've been in a public school a little while, and once you've eventually attained tenure, then it's much more difficult to be fired. I'd say, but in private and charter schools, there's no union to protect you. So in private schools and charter schools, you could be here today and gone tomorrow. And that's just the nature of the business. Yeah, I mean, but in a public school, you know, if you're a tenured teacher, it'll take forever to fire you. I mean, it could take a year or two to fire a tenured teacher. So yeah, there's more job security, absolutely, in public schools, but in private and charter schools, I think I enjoy private and charter schools. Like, I mean, it's sometimes a charter school has a very specific demographic that they focus on and serve and welcome. Sometimes private schools, you know, they have more family-like atmosphere. Also in charter schools, I've seen that as well. You know, in terms of extra jobs, I don't know. I think the most, in terms of getting extra jobs and extra responsibilities, I think I got more extra jobs thrown at me when I was in private school. But in charter school, jobs I do like things like lunch duty and parking lot duty. I've spent a lot of time in parking lots. I'm really good at directing traffic. I could probably retire and get a job, you know, directing traffic anywhere, because I've done so much traffic direction in school parking lots. So that's been in charter and private schools. So yeah, we get more. I think I get more chores thrown at me in private school, whereas in charter schools, more responsibilities. Because charter schools, yes, it's true. Charter schools have a different reputation that is often challenged. Charter schools have to do more with less. Remember what I talked about earlier with the funding? Charter schools get state funding, but they do not get the local funding. So they have to do more with less, and they have to prove themselves worthy, and that's often very difficult. And so sometimes, I think when people are angered by charter schools and when people don't like charter schools, that anger has never been come to me as a person. It's always been directed towards the system. I have lots of teacher friends who are in public schools. None of them dislike me. I haven't lost any friends because I decided to work for a charter school. You know, so, but yeah, there is a reputation that you have to, that you know, goes up and down. I mean, realistically, I mean, with Betsy DeVos, she's a big supporter of charter schools, and she doesn't have many friends. You know, a lot of people do not like Betsy DeVos, and she really supports charter schools, and she really supports online schools. And because of all the negativity that went her direction, the people started aiming that negativity on anything that she supported. So, you know, but you know, it doesn't come to me personally. It's just more of like a general banter, you know. So.
I mean, I think there is a reason that there are the rumors and the stereotypes about charters. I think for me, it really boiled down to leadership. So I am at my current school because of my classmate who said to me, really, she's like LMAC quality. I'm like, what do you mean by that? But like, I feel like she treats us very at a professional level. I never feel like I have to do these extra jobs, and my principal is actually ESL herself, and so she actually really values my position. Which might not be the case at other schools, like if I was an ESL teacher somewhere else, but on a personal level, she's really cared for me too, and I see, it's not just personal, but like, you can see how passionate she is about the students, and she walks around every morning greeting all the kids in the classes, and the teachers, and whereas like, I've had experiences with other places where there was a high rate of turnover because the leadership would say some things, and then there was, for me, I felt like it was a lack of integrity, and I have real problems with that. And so I think it also depends on, like you were saying, if your friend was going to put her kids in a school, you have to really think about the child's needs. like, I worked in a charter where a lot of the kids went there because that was the closest school to them, and it was a logistics thing. Or right now I'm in a school where a lot of these parents, like, they feel happy that their kids go to school in Dearborn. It's like a pride thing. And so I think it really depends on that family's needs. So, and I think it's also helpful to know what the culture of a school is like, which is really hard to know when you're like interviewing, like, tell me about the school, and then unless you're like on the inside, they're not really gonna share with you about the climate there. But I think it speaks volumes when people can right off the bat say, like, seem very genuine in their, like, oh, well, this is the reputation, and not just the performance, because like my school, like, we're in basically Detroit, and we didn't do so well in math last year on the map and on AMSTEP, so it was like, you know, not growth. But it's a great community because of other things, not just the data. So there are a lot of things to consider when thinking about public versus charter.
I think with charter and private schools, many charter schools are so specialized and so interesting, and so different, and so unique, and so passionate about one or certain causes or certain demographics. That's kind of the advantage to go into a private or charter school, is that you have something very unique compared to a public school.
Thank you guys. Yeah, I think that just goes along the lines of what we try to tell you guys about not just labeling a school based on its school setting, right? There's going to be good, bad, and mediocre in public, charter, private, all of them. So it really comes down to the research that you do with every single school that you may apply to for a position.
I'd say the boss makes the biggest difference.
The boss.
Admin is what you're looking
That,
for.
the boss will make or break your world. Your world will be a wonderful world, or you'll be turning gray early, depending upon the boss. It's not private, charter, or public, it's the boss. So try to do your homework, find out about the boss.
And then with your student teaching, I don't know if your professors have suggested that you go see other people at other schools, but you should do that. That is exactly what I did. And it was super helpful to see, wow, the logistics here are very different than the logistics here. And like, the type of students here are very different than the type of students over here. And so the admin and the students and the teachers, they all make the school. And so you get to start seeing, picking and choosing, like, where do I belong? What's my connection? So this is the time where you go out, you check other schools, because I'm not gonna say you have that freedom, but you know, you're able to move, like, hey, this week I wanna go see this person at this school, so I'm gonna take a ride with them, or I wanna go with them on a Tuesday, and that's totally allowed. I don't think it's not allowed, right?
No, how did you go about doing that?
So I have a very interesting perspective. So I'm not from Michigan. I'm from New York City, and so I've only lived in Michigan for about 4-ish years. So I don't drive. So it's been a very interesting 4 years of not driving in Michigan. So something that my professors had told me, especially with job security, is just to be careful about where you're working, in the sense of, like, if you know people who get fired quickly, like, that's not going to be safe for me, because I don't have family out here. I don't have other people out here, so if I'm fired, I'm going to be hopeless. Like, that was like my immediately thought process, and I know a lot of us may be worried about that. But so for me, it was all carpooling. So I would speak to other people in my classes, and they would tell me about their school, and I just would take, because I don't know if you have built a community with your cohorts, like you build a strong community with your cohorts, with your buddies and this and that. And I even tried going cross-curricular, because we were all in way different schools. Like, we maybe were lucky if there were like 3 or 4 of us in one school, but sometimes it'd be one person at one school and 2 people at another school. Which was better though, because that means I got to see more schools. So it seems like isolation, but it's like, no, you're doing more research for other people in your program. And so I would just, at dinner or in our classes, can I get a ride with you on Tuesday? Or like, I'm gonna sleep over tonight and we're gonna go to your school tomorrow, and then you're gonna drive me to class tomorrow. We were friends, we were very close. And so that's exactly what I did, and it's that simple. And checking with the professors and your field instructor, right, that what you have, your field instructor, is that 650 still? They're like, yes, please do that, but you have to check with your mentor teacher, because your mentor teacher, sometimes depending on your mentor teacher, they like latch onto you and they really want you to do amazing things in their classroom, so of course, they will say yes, but you have to tell them, right? So I have not seen an instance where they're like, no, you can't go, I need you too much, because that would be weird. Or maybe it's a good thing because they love you so much. But you need to go out and investigate schools. That is what our undergrad, this MAC program is for. You need to see what other schools are like. And I don't know when you're gonna, like when you start teaching, I'm lucky if I get to another school. Maybe with my fellowship, I could write grants to visit other fellows, but other than that, I'm in my classroom, so I would not have other times to see other schools.
I totally agree. Go out and see as much as you possibly can. Different subjects, different schools, public, private, charter. Go and see as much as you possibly can. You know, if you're a science teacher, don't be afraid to go see a social studies teacher.
Yes.
You know, if you're gung ho high school, hey, go see a middle school. You know, and if you're gung ho middle school, go see a high school and elementary school. You might change your mind. You know, I was gung ho middle school, and now I'm really happy with high school. That was my estimate back then, but yeah, I would totally agree with that. Yeah, see as much as you can. Yeah.
I've picked a lot of my teaching practices from elementary school teachers and history teachers and maybe some science teachers. So like, big bag right there. So everybody will give you something that you could use in your classroom. I'm a very silly person when it comes to my students, and I got that from my elementary school teachers or elementary school teachers that I've observed. And that works in the high school, by the way. When you're very silly, sometimes it works for you. And I've seen how history teachers have run their classroom, and I love certain things, and I feel like that fits with my personality. So don't be stuck in, I need to see what I'm doing, because you will see what you're doing every day in your placement, because your placement is what you're supposed to be doing, if I'm not correct.
I was student teaching during the election of 2000. Please don't tell me how old you were then. But during the election of 2000 was the one that was not decided on election night and took months to decide, and was eventually decided in, I think, like December or January. And even though I was a science teacher, I went to history classrooms because they were having the time of their life during the election of 2000. You know, each day, we didn't really know who the president was going to be. And it's exciting for those social studies teachers, and I could see the passion of those social studies teachers tracking the news. You know, some of them had like scoreboards that they would update each day with the number of ballots being counted in Florida. So it was quite exciting.
Who has another question?
I wasn't here earlier, so I'm sorry if you had gone over this already, but in kind of relation to this, what were some steps, like if you're interviewing or looking to apply to an area, to maybe get in contact with the school and get to know the culture during and before the interview process? I know you said visit, but were there any other steps that you might be able to take after the program or during the process?
During the interview process?
Our
application process?
Mm-hmm. Or even if you're just trying to get to know an area or
Yeah.
a school district. I'm never sure how open schools are to being like, hey, can I like walk around your school and just check it out? So
Well,
I didn't
I
know.
mean, if you call ahead, if you're interested in if you're interested in a particular school, you could certainly call ahead. You could most likely call ahead and get the opportunity to visit a school.
Mhm.
But in the end, they're going to tell you to follow the usual application process. So whether it might help you get in. Might. Depends upon how complex their interview process is. So, but it's certainly reasonable to say, hi, I'm applying for jobs in the spring, and I'd love to see if I can come see your school. Can I sit in on a few classes? Most schools will be okay with that. Most.
Do you use AppleTrack or like those application process
No,
or the consortiums? I was standing in front of my my principal now. I was standing in front of my principal, and she just pulled up the AppleTrack on her phone, and it's like, we need like an English teacher, and then there's a long list of people who selected for English, and she knew none of those names. How do you think she went about picking a name? If that name was somebody was like, oh, I know that person, or if they came and visited the school. So for me or for anybody, you could email them, and just even that email could be like, I know that name. I've seen that name before. You're at the top of the list of the people that I'm going to pull through this consortium. But another thing that I did, especially in Belleville, and it was weird because the first restaurant I ever went to when I moved to Michigan, I was living in Ann Arbor, but for some reason they brought me to Belleville, and I didn't know it was Belleville at the time. And I was like, wow, this town is really cute. Has anybody ever been to Belleville? It's a really cute little town. There's a lake over there. They have something known as the Strawberry Festival. And I was like, wow, I really love this. Is like so cute. And like all the stores are like owned by families. And so like I would love to be in this area. And so that was kind of like a driving force for me wanting to work in that area. So just hang out in the area. Even if you go, can I say get a drink? If you go get have a juice. In the area, or if you get food in the area, and you can even speak. It's better if you speak to the people like off script than if you're speaking to the people in the school. Because in the school, they might be trying to sell things to you, or maybe they'll be like, yeah, it's great. But if you speak to somebody in a restaurant or an adult place, they will tell you what it is. And there was a place in Michigan where the pub says, we support Michigan, we support Belleville teachers, which is a big thing. Like, I love seeing those signs because I'm like, wait, that's me. And the people in there talk about how much they love the teachers, and there's always families in there who are just like, oh, I love this teacher and I love that teacher, and that could be a selling point for you. And if that's the type of community that you like, if that's what you're looking for, if you're looking for more privacy, if you're like, no, I just wanted to be the school and then green and then I want nothing there, that's another thing where you're like, oh, I want no community there, so if I live there, then, it depends on what your personality is. So checking out the area around the school, and then, of course, emailing. You can email anyone, right? Email any professor, and that's why we have the MAC program, because you can email any one of us, and we can give you connections that, oh, I know this person who works at this school, or I know this person that works in this school. So email, phone call, I would say never be afraid to make a phone call or an email, because that's like a big step. And it's a name that gets pulled to the top of the list in an Apple track by your principal.
Yeah, I have to agree. I mean, my situation, the way I got my job was my friend who was my classmate when we were in LMAC. And I asked her, I was like, are you happy there? And she's like, yeah, I love it here. And God, because we're very similar, and we had we were actually next to each other in our student teaching, and we had very similar experiences. So I was like, geez, if she's happy, then I think I might be happy. And I asked her about the leadership and if she had any hesitations, and she's like, no. And she's like, I think I may hire you because you're my friend. But also, like, because the quality of her work was so, everybody appreciated it so much, and they were like, wow, you've only been here a couple of months, but I see the quality of your work. And you have a friend who has the same training as you, can she come work here? And so, I mean, they weren't as eager a person, obviously. They were like, we're going to ask you all these questions, but I felt very grateful to have that. My training kind of preceded me, like, this is the quality of work that you can expect from this person because of someone else who's here. So I would definitely say, like, the networking piece is amazing, but also she happened to be my friend, and so I get to work with my friend, which is nice. Yeah.
And if you happen to be at that point in your time where you are substitute teaching, I mean, typically, you're probably not going to have too much of a chance at all for doing any substitute teaching, especially while you're in school. But if you happen to be substitute teaching, that's a great way to network too. That very often leads to full-time positions. Doesn't pay a lot, but I think it's a great way to make yourself known to a school.
If you don't know who to contact, go to Laura Myers and say, hey, you have a list of alumni, where are they at? I will email them. And you just email them. And your alumni, they love helping out, and they will give you some sort of response. So I would suggest you doing that.
Oh, and the big job fair school, the big teacher job fair in spring. Do you know what it is?
It's in April.
April, yeah. In April. I mean, it's big. I mean, there's U of M does one, and EMU does one, and some other universities do them. And you go, and that's I have gotten jobs from the job fair. Twice I got a job from the job fair. So it's big. Get there early and bring a stack of resumes. It's very big, but you can get a job from the job fair. I can attest to that personally.
Yeah, I'll find the date. I know
April
it's-
19th.
There we go.
There you go.
It's
Put
different
that on your
days
calendar.
every year. But yeah, we couldn't agree more. The networking piece is just as important as the actual submitting of applications. And please get in touch with Shamil or I if you are interested in connecting with alumni. Thank you, Anthony. Any other questions? If not, I have one.
And by the way, when we're all done, I did bring my laptop with me, so if you want to see what online education looks like, I brought my laptop with me and I can show you what it looks like, towards the end. So if you're interested, stick around when we're all done, I'll show you that.
Can you guys talk a little bit about the salary? So how is that established? Is that negotiable in the interview process? That's a frequent question that we get from students when we're meeting with them.
Before I left school today, I went to a bunch of people and I was like, what can I say about salary and what's like allowed and like, do you have to kind of bring the sheet? And they're like, no, it's like the sheet that has all the salaries. So it really depends on your district, because salaries depend on district. And years ago, this was before I was there, my district was in the red. And so it happens, and when that happens, like there's deficit spending, or there's something going on with money, and so I'm talking about a negative time, a bad issue would be salary freezes, and that had happened when I had walked into my school. But this past year, the freezes were gone a couple years ago, but they had slowly started to come back. But when I was hired a couple years ago, I have two masters, and so the way it works is it was like a pay scale. So it was like bachelor's plus X amount, masters plus 30, and masters plus 30 would be like the highest amount, 30 credits, and then you had steps. And so it was like step 1, step 2, step 3, and you're supposed to start at step 1 wherever you are with your credentials. And that's kind of how am I supposed to give a number?
Whatever you're comfortable.
Oh yeah, that's right, I'm sorry. I'm like that annoying student. So depending on the time and what type of credentials you had, you were supposed to start at step 1. If there's an inconsistent district, which I've heard and seen and maybe even experienced, sometimes they're just like, yeah, you sound great, we're going to start you at step 3. And that became arbitrary. And so over the last 365 days, our union fought really hard to just get rid of this step business and kind of adjust our schedule and pay scale. And so there are no steps anymore. And it's just, you earn it by year or by a certain amount of professional development or some sort. So it's not credit-based, but it's kind of like, they call it a point. So it's not a step anymore. It's just like 0.5, 1, 1.52, and that scale kind of goes up in certain increments, and it does go up every year. And so that's kind of like how my district is run. There is an organization. It was a big deal for our district because everybody was always unhappy about the salary, and the union fought really hard to fix the salary. Every time I had gone to union meetings, this big idea was, what are we going to do about the salary? How are we going to fix this? What are we going to do? And then in addition to salary, as far as being paid, you do also get paid for extracurricular activities, so that kind of goes part of your pay scale. So for example, I did long list, but I direct the school play and musical. I'm part of student council. I'm part of our school's leadership team, and I'm missing one. Oh, I just started our school's GSA. So all of those, they go to your original salary, and you get a certain percentage that is negotiable. And it depends on how often you're going to meet. If it's in its first year, depending on, with the student council, I'm the advisor for the juniors now, and that's a big to do. And then next year we're the advisors for the seniors, so that kind of goes up. So they have something set in stone as to how you get paid for extracurriculars. And it really just depends on your district and how they organize that. But that's an example of what mine looks like.
I agree with that. It depends on the district. My districts are their own, the school is its own district. But when I was at a different charter, they had a sheet, I guess, that was similar to the steps where it was like, oh, you're coming out with your bachelor's degree and you have no experience, this is where you're starting.
Yep.
But if you're like bachelor's with this much experience or master's and you're brand new, like they had all of that laid out very clearly. But where I'm at right now is like, well, I don't really know what is the starting salary. So I still have no idea because people don't really talk about their salaries that much. But because my training was different from a lot of the people who were brand new teachers. So I do know, I also talked to someone today, what can I say? And she said, beginning teachers at my school, it's same pay even if you have a few years of experience, and it's negotiable based on like your training. So like for me with my master's degree, they were like, okay, we're not gonna pay you what someone fresh out of undergrad would make, like we will talk about this, and also because it's a charter and like you were saying we get less money, they're like, well, I know you want this number, but we can't do that because of funding. And I mean, is teaching really about the money? But
No.
I was like, I'll
That's a
take
great
it.
question.
I want a job. And so, yeah.
Steps, I don't know what those are.
Right.
So salary schedule, huh? What's that? Working in charter school, working in private school, quite often, all that neat little structure that y'all got in the public schools, sometimes, typically in a private and charter school, you won't see any, formal, schedules and charts and, steps and all that stuff. Sometimes they'll pay you for your master's degree, sometimes not. Sometimes they'll just say, this is what you pay, this is what the job pays, that's it. Like, sometimes there is no negotiation, there is no, rhyme or reason that's explained to you, you're just given a number, and, take it or leave it. Not negotiable. I can't remember last time I had any opportunity to negotiate anything. So, and in a charter school where I work, I get paid less. Yeah, I'm not getting paid the same amount as someone with the same amount of experience who's in, a public school. But I work at home, so I got some great perks. I don't have to, my shoe budget is way less. Because I don't have to put on a nice this collared shirt. I wasn't wearing this earlier because we don't normally use our web cameras for virtual education because they don't need to see my face. They need to see my virtual whiteboard. So typically we don't even use our web cameras because that would put an extra drain on the internet connection of the students, and many of them are in rural areas where they have a very poor internet connection, so typically don't use our webcams, but they do see our virtual whiteboard. Anyway, what I'm getting at is I don't have to look professional. So I don't have to drive anywhere, so there's less wear and tear on my car. I don't have to pay gas. Food expenses are less. Professional attire is, I don't have to wear professional attire, I just wear casual clothes. In one of our staff meetings last year, the principal said, I realize that many of you are probably teaching in your pajamas, but please don't say that to your students. Okay, they are in their pajamas too, probably. So although I don't get paid as much, I do get a little bit of a bonus. Anytime I have to drive somewhere, I get compensation for driving somewhere. If I have to go to Lansing for a meeting where my school is based, then I get the usual federal number for mileage and stuff like that. So, there's compensation, especially in gas and wear and tear of my cars. There's a huge difference in professional tires. So there's lots of pluses and minuses.
I do want to stress what was mentioned before, that you do not get into teaching for the money, and if you are,
Totally, yeah.
don't be in
Wrong
business.
profession.
Right, yeah, wrong job, yeah.
If
yeah.
you're looking for the money, it is not in teaching.
No, no,
and
it's-
you do it because you want to do it.
Right.
And that is something that kills me sometimes with coworkers or people that I speak to, where it's just like, I don't get paid enough to do this. And I was like, well, no one does. And you gotta find that pride within yourself. Like, you do this for you and you do it for your kids. And I don't even look at my paychecks.
I think it depends on the things that you value too. I know of some churches that have great benefits, but I knew I wouldn't be happy there because the way I was trained in LMAC, it's like, oh, I want to develop what I'm going to teach, whereas they were like, here's your prescriptive curriculum, just read the script and you'll be fine. And I was like, I'm not going to be happy here. So I think it depends on like, what do you value? I have a friend who is at a charter that she's very unhappy. She's been there for 7 years, and it's because she's doing her master's and they're helping her to pay for it. That's what she values. It's like, yay, you do you. But so I think it really depends. Or like other people, they're like, I hate my job, but my family needs the insurance here. And so I think it really, that when you're considering money and salary, it depends on the things that you value.
Yeah, then I have a question for you. So I've heard, now you can dispel the myth from what I hear. So I hear from, as a charter private teacher, that once you've been in a public school for several years, they own you. Like, there's just no escape. You've been in a public school, for example, for 10 years, they own you. You're going to retire there. You know, if you leave, it's going to be like terrible because you're going to go way down in your pay, and you feel like you're locked in. Is that that's true or not?
So I'm only in my 3rd year of
I
actual
know.
teaching, but I have one of my coworkers she's in her 17th year. We had a conversation because she feels a bit unhappy with our school, and I said, you could go anywhere, or why would you, if you're so unhappy, and it's because she trusts, and I'm not telling her to leave, I'm like, go away, no, I just so you could go anywhere, and she told me because her pay scale would drop greatly if she would have started another school, so that's what she had told me.
Yeah.
As far as being engulfed into there, yes, they have swallowed me whole. I don't know if you heard the 4 things that I am signed up to do. I mean, that was all my fault, but they were like, yes, we love you, please do it. So I do feel kind of sucked into the atmosphere and latched on by admin and other people. So, yeah.
And by the way, I did student government. I get paid extra for it. See, so that,
no, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah.
I think I'm a government worker.
Right. Yeah. So yeah.
Is there any last question? I think I have one. Okay, great.
So I get the question from students all the time just around the amount of time that's really put into the work, and that's, prepping, doing lessons, things like that, also taking on these extracurriculars. So in a week, how many hours really would you say that you're actually working? And is that compared to, what you thought it would be?
You sure when he is done?
Yes, they need to be
I
prepared.
think people are gonna drop out. So this is a big, and I'm only in my 3rd year, and so I was told I'm figuring out that things will slowly start teetering off, maybe 5th year, maybe 10th year, I don't know. That's just a beautiful rumor that I hope is true. But my 1st year of teaching was almost, I slept in my classroom 3 times, and it's a bit dramatic, and that's just me. I also live up the block from the school. So I took advantage of that. But this is my 3rd year, and I've figured out how to manage my time maybe a little bit better, maybe not so much, because of all the things that I end up being involved in, or because of if I'm involved in this thing until 6 or 7, then I gotta spend the next couple of hours making sure I'm ready for this day or that day, or making a test and whatnot. So on average, including the work time, I probably finish, I would say it's anywhere between 10 at night and 11 at night from being up at 6 or 7 in the morning. Finish okay, I'm good to go to bed for tomorrow, and then I'm sure put this up until tomorrow. And when I was in the math program, a prediction or a guesstimate would be I would do all of my work on the weekend, and it would all happen on Sunday, and then the week would be easy. And boy, was I wrong. And so I find that if I do spurts every day, my weekends become easier, and you want your weekend. You don't, so that's what it's looking like right now, where Saturday, I do nothing. Saturday's my day off. Even Friday, after I leave school, whatever that is, I do nothing. So Friday to Saturday, and then Sunday I'm back in work mode for the week.
I'm very similar to that too, actually. And Friday, yeah, I'm done. Yeah,
Done.
Saturday, Andrew. Saturday, I'm a dad all day long. My wife works on weekends. So Saturday is mostly just me being a dad while my wife is at work. And Sunday I do work, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday evenings I do work. I have a very low attention span. I mentioned earlier that I have Tourette's syndrome, so with Tourette's, most people who have Tourette's have very low attention span, and I have like attention span than that. So I do have to put in extra hours just because of that to compensate for it. But the nice thing about it is because I work from home, I can take breaks, I can go back and forth. It's really easy for me to manage my attention span as low as it is when I'm working from home. Because, like, Andrew, what do I do after I put you to bed? Work. Right, so, and it's, it's not, and it's all sitting there and ready for me. I don't have to close down a laptop and lug it home because I'm already home, so makes it easier for me. But yeah, I spend a lot of hours, evenings and weekends. That's what teachers do. It's all what teachers do. But yes, you're absolutely right. It does get better. Over time, my first year, oh gosh, yeah. I spent, my first year teaching. And your first year in a new position, too. If you change schools, your first year in that new position is going to be a lot of new stuff. Especially like if you go from teaching, 8th grade science in the middle school to all of a sudden teaching 11th grade AP physics or something like that, then you're gonna have a big, world change. So
it depends on your preps too. So I have 3 preps because I teach AP chemistry, honors chemistry, and organic chemistry. So like those are technically 3 separate preps that I have to be prepared for. But in my first year, I technically had 1 prep, but it was like conceptual chemistry and honors chemistry. So I kind of did the same thing with them, except honors would be a little bit more inquiry based. So it felt easier, but it was my first year, so I was making everything from scratch. And so don't reinvent the wheel, because that is what takes Steal. It's there for a reason. Steal, modify, stuff is there for a reason. Yeah. Don't feel like you have to make everything new and your own. Put your own font on it. There you go. Then it's yours.
I even have a disclaimer at the beginning of my PowerPoint slides that I show my students. That it's in fine print, but it says, not all content that I've presented here today is my original work. Yeah. Because I steal stuff that's really available on the internet. If some other teachers put up a nice lesson plan, I'll take it. There's lots of great resources that you can find. So, it depends on how many preps you have. It depends on whether it's your first year or your 5th year. But, this year for the first year, I'm teaching physical science. So I've never taught physical science before, so I gotta get stuff. Fortunately, I have a previous teacher who gave me lots of stuff that I can use. So I take that teacher's stuff and I modify it and make it my own.
I'd have to say, like, when I was when I was doing my program and student teaching, I was putting in like 8+ hours of work. I don't calculate what I'm doing right now because now I'm not in school. But my the guy I was dating at the time, who's not my husband, he was like, "Gosh, you work a lot. Like, you work so much." And then he like calculated it. He's like, "Oh my gosh, what is this?" And so it is a lot of work. But I think in terms of like how much work you put in, I think that like developing things and learning your curriculum, like that does take time. But I think for me, I'm gonna go back to my word of values. Like, I got married right after I got out of the Alumni program, and I did spend a lot of time working, and that was something I had to work out with my husband. He was like, how are we going to make time for our relationship? And I don't have to spend like all my time with him after I'm out of work, but if I chose to invest in this relationship, like I need to show him like my commitment. And I think for other people, like, their commitments might be their families or their pets or their plants, like I have plants, or you have like, people have extracurriculars, but it's like, how is it that you want to spend your time? And for me, I was like, I love teaching, but I also have other things, like, it's not just my marriage, but I'm doing a lot of other things outside of work that I consider valuable to me. And so there, I take that into consideration too. So I'm basically done on Fridays, and then, I try to work as much as I can before I like to try to rest on Sundays because, well, I go to church, and so I'm like, well, I want to rest, and I feel like if you don't make those times to rest, or even like do the things that you enjoy, like you're gonna burn out. And I feel like that's a real thing in our industry. Like people who are like work without taking time to sharpen themselves, or even just to do something non-work related. Like this year, I got a membership at this tech shop, which is like a maker space in Detroit, and I learned how to use a laser cutter. And sometimes after work, I will go and cut things like from acrylic, or I will etch things, and it's really fun. And like I don't think I need to feel guilty doing that, because like creating is what helps me to take care of myself. Like mental health is really important too, because like if you're not well, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're not going to be effective taking care of your students too. So I don't know if you're expecting me to hear that. I think it's like, yeah, this is work, but I think it's also really important to, like, you need to take care of yourself, whatever that looks like.
And you can have a life outside of school.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. You can be married, you can have a child. You know, you can have an interesting summer job. You know, I work at summer camps during the summertime. You know, right? You know, there's lots of this. You know, you might have enough money for a vacation. You know, maybe not the most exotic vacation, okay? But you know, I mean, you might be able to afford a trip to Florida. You know, I mean, you know, there's, you know, the money isn't great, but you do have time, and you budget your time, and you're all teachers, so you're all smart, and so you all can figure out how to budget your time, budget your money, and budget your life to do whatever you want to do. I mean, and by the way, although I'm not married to a teacher, yes, teachers can marry other teachers. They can even work in the same building. That happens. Not quite sure how, but they do it. You know, and they, you know, sometimes, you know, they're having to manage their lives too.
Well, I just want to say thank you to our wonderful panelists for coming out tonight. You guys shared some really great stories and advice, and I hope you all take them up on their offer to connect with them. Again, their email addresses are on that handout. If you guys are interested in learning more about virtual schools, Larry's going to be here to show you a little bit. And again, I think if you take anything from tonight, it is take this time. I know your plates are full, but take this time to really research and explore different schools. And if any pique your interest, reach out, talk to people, right? It's the only way you're going to really figure out if